So when we're looking at addressing these challenges, there's multiple ones that come up, whether it is something like multiple building locations, any way that we can help business continuity and effectively overcome any challenges, get that communication out nice and quickly, make sure that everybody's on the same page with what's going on, that's what we're looking to do. Sometimes we might have more high ambient noise within these facilities, and it's a combination of both visual and audio to be able to get that message across. In some instances, maybe we don't have the ability to utilize any cell phones, or access to cell phones is minimal. We need resources to be able to capture their attention and get that message across, whatever that alerting message may be. So these are all types of challenges that we come across regularly, and types of challenges that we look for when we're putting together a solution within an industrial or manufacturing environment. Now, addressing some of these challenges, so what are some of these challenges pretty much? Now, when we're in these environments, as you see here on this image, we might have confined areas, large, loud, open areas where it may be difficult to get a message across to people. When we're walking through these facilities, or when we're addressing these concerns, the first step questions we're asking, do our staff have the ability or have access to activate an alert if they were in an emergency situation? And second, do these staff have the ability or access or means to be notified in the event of an emergency? If the answer is no, then we need to address these problems, and we need to overcome them with some form of activation and alerting solution. One of which might be a hazardous areas where the challenge of that ambient noise level, like we've discussed earlier, may be an obstacle to be able to effectively get that message out. Audible doesn't always cut it, so it's important that we take that layered approach to ensure that we have both a visual and an audible representation of that message to all staff, all employees throughout that facility. We're not always going to have direct access or personal access to those individuals. We need to overcome that with a layered approach and multiple solutions to fit all. Sometimes we're working within confined spaces. These are another example of the limitations of accessing people either through, say, a visual notification, or if that confined space has a lot of obstacles in its way, then it's difficult to always get that message across or for it to be heard clearly. Ensuring that all of these concerns are met is the first point of concern when we're looking to put a solution in place. Again, going back to the question, do my staff, do my employees, do the personnel within this facility have the ability to notify those personnel, whether it's security staff or managerial personnel, in the event of an emergency? And do they have the means of receiving that emergency alert as well? These are two of the questions that we should be addressing. Here we have some statistics on injury citations throughout the manufacturing environments. And I think what you can see from take away from this is it's not always if, but when. This can be a very reactive industry, typically putting something in place after there has been an incident, after they've had an emergency, and they've seen the shortfalls, or they've seen the lack of communication devices that they have or don't have within this area. Then they take the next steps. With these statistics, you can see it's not necessarily bound to happen, but it is a common areas of concern throughout these facilities. We need to address it nice and early, and we need to put a solution in place. So who is Alert Asst? We are pioneers in emergency mass notification. We focus on facility-based emergency mass notification. We have a global reach of over 2,000 customers across all sectors, all industries, from education, government, to healthcare, and more. We're constantly growing. We're homegrown and operated, based out of Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C. area, with a presence in pretty much every state in the US and globally as well. Now, how does Alert Asst approach unified mass notification, especially within the industrial and manufacturing environment? So we take a three-pronged solution, if you will, to emergency mass notification. First and foremost, we want to give all the end users a single point of activation. Knowing that they have the confidence to push one button and reach as many endpoints as possible within seconds is our key concern, and that's what we look to put into place. Second, we're always looking to integrate with as many existing assets as possible. We don't want to recreate the wheel or have you to put in a brand new system in place to notify everyone if we have infrastructure and assets that we can utilize from the get-go. So we're always looking to integrate. And then finally, we want to be able to fill those gaps with either our hardware or software solutions in those areas where you may feel that you are vulnerable. If we don't have the ability to either communicate with those staff or have the staff be able to communicate with security personnel or managerial personnel, we can fill those gaps with our solutions as well. And that's what we are going to look over here. Now, as we're going back to the challenges that we have to overcome in these industrial and manufacturing environments, we really do want to take a layered approach because of the fact, as we discussed in those challenging environments, it's not always going to be, say, an audible notification that's going to be the most effective. It may not always be a visual notification that's going to be effective. Within the same plant, within the same building, verbal might be more effective than visual and vice versa. We need to address the concerns, look at the environment as a whole, and put the correct solution in place. Now, when we're talking about a layered approach, we're talking about ensuring that the appropriate message is distributed to individuals that are coming into the building or leaving the building through outdoor notification, as well as looking at what message is being distributed throughout either the existing infrastructure that we're integrating with or the solutions that we've put in place from an indoor perspective as well. But most importantly, making sure that we're communicating with as many individuals as possible in a variety of different ways, whether that's personal, whether that's through a public address system, whether that's through clear voice outside, or whether it's, say, a desktop notification to the office staff who are maybe monitoring the staff that are down in the manufacturing environment as well. There's multiple layers that we have to cover. That's the direction that we take when we're coming into these, or when we're trying to overcome the challenges that are often present within the industrial and manufacturing environment. Now, looking at the layered approach and looking at it from just a typical layout example within, say, a manufacturing or that general industrial environment, you can see here the variety of different ways in which we would look to implement something, both from a visual and an audible perspective, but additionally scattering activation devices throughout to give everybody the ability to notify designated individuals or send out that mass notification across all endpoints through the activation in the event of that emergency as well. We have large open areas, we have the office spaces, we have smaller confined stairways and bathroom areas, all areas that need to be covered. And if individuals are in those areas, they need to be able to be reached. We need to be able to notify them in the event of these emergency situations. So how does that look? What does that solution look like? We have multiple audible and visual devices to combat all of these challenges that we've discussed and that we often come up against. And Alert Asst can fill those gaps that we may have in any areas where you may feel vulnerable, in those certain areas, hard to reach areas that we can't communicate with our personnel. Everything from our alert beacons that have both a visual and an audible notification built into it, we'll discuss in more detail shortly, to our own IP-based indoor speakers and outdoor high-powered speaker arrays with clear voice technology that's able to communicate with individuals over vast distances, utilizing our text-to-speech module to convert that visual representation of the message to an audible message that can then be sent over either our speakers or through the integration of a PA system or a general speaker system that the manufacturing or industrial area may have in place. As we mentioned, We're always looking to integrate with assets as much as possible. Infrastructure that's already in place can be great resources that we can pull into play and now utilize as a communication device to effectively communicate with all individuals across all endpoints. Things such as desktop notification is a great way to take over the immediate surroundings of those office personnel, as well as, say, VoIP and IP phones within the office environment throughout that facility. But then additionally leveraging maybe a current PA system, any digital signs that may be accessible throughout that facility. We're looking to integrate, we're looking to pull that into play and now utilize as an endpoint to effectively communicate with all individuals throughout the building. Now, as we are going back to that layered approach to communicating with all individuals, you'll see through our integration capabilities on this slide, as well as the solution filling the gaps with our own Alert Asst hardware and software solutions, the layered approach comes into play in the multiple ways in which individuals can be reached, whether it is through that personal notification through our mobile app, whether it is through that personal notification of leveraging somebody's desktop screen or VoIP phone, or whether or not we're going to take that audible notification and distribute that message over a PA system and reach as many people as possible throughout the facility. It's important that we've got all bases covered, and we can do so with these solutions that we have in place. Within the industrial and manufacturing environment, one piece of our hardware, our alert beacon, that is often used for a number of different reasons, one of which being the strobe lighting, that is a visual representation of an emergency alert along with that text on the screen. But we also have a 106 decibel speaker built into that alert beacon. So for example, if we are in those confined spaces, if we are in those hallways, those stairwells, those bathroom areas, we need to capture the attention of people quickly and effectively by both a visual and audible means. The alert beacon does just that. This is power over Ethernet, easily wall mounted, so we can put these in those hard to reach areas and know that we are passing effective communication to these endpoints in a timely manner. When we're going back to, say, those confined areas and we were asking ourselves, do our staff, one, have the ability to be able to receive a notification in the event of an emergency, but two, do our staff have the ability to activate and initiate the emergency notification if they are in an emergency situation? We look to things such as our duress button to do that. Again, easily mounted in those hard to reach areas. If you have areas where you feel that you may be vulnerable, maybe areas where you keep chemicals or where there's large transportation vehicles present, and you have those areas where you have typical high risk areas where you want to give your staff the means to be able to communicate quickly and effectively, the duress buttons do just that. We can tie preset messages to these duress buttons so that if it is a chemical spill, if it is a large vehicle crash within that immediate vicinity, or whether it is a lockdown scenario, these duress buttons have the appropriate text and preset message assigned to them so that through the push of that individual button, they can be confident to know that within seconds, the appropriate message has been distributed. Now, when we are looking, again, coming back to the challenges that we have to overcome, these are large facilities, open facilities with loud noises, often hard to reach areas for these individuals. When we are putting, say, our panic buttons in place, when we are putting the alert beacons in place, the preset messages that we are tying to these duress buttons are very unique to that general area within the facility. So we're not only sending out an alert, we are sending out an alert with further information. Duress button in the front lobby has been activated. Please evacuate through the rear of the building. Chemical spill within the floor plant A. Please do not enter that area. Everybody within that area evacuate using this exit. We can be very specific as to what information we're passing on based upon where these duress buttons, where these alert beacons are located throughout the facility. Additionally, going back to both the visual and audible notification, Sometimes when we are in those large facility areas, maybe the alert beacon and that text on the screen, maybe the LED lights are enough to capture the attention, but from a visual perspective, we want an additional peripheral device to be able to pass on further effective information in the event of that emergency. Our LED marquee is a peripheral device that plugs directly into the back of the alert beacon. Once that alert beacon receives that message, a larger visual representation of that message is displayed on our LED marquees. Within these areas, the LED marquees we have dual use here. We have the clock, and then when it's not in use, it's the emergency alert. The individuals within that environment get used to looking in that general direction for information. Now, in the event of that emergency, the LED marquee is being pulled into play and is an effective resource to be able to communicate with all the users throughout that facility. Additionally, oftentimes two-way radios are the mechanism in which we are communicating, or in which you are communicating with all your staff throughout the facility. If we have multiple, say, security and facility personnel walking throughout the facility, maybe they're indoor, maybe they're outdoor, maybe they're in multiple buildings, we need a means to be able to effectively communicate with them wherever they are. Leveraging your two-way radios, taking over that radio frequency and verbally expressing that emergency alert is an additional way to do that. We can now give you that layered approach, so at the same time that that emergency button is pushed, not only is, say, the desktops receiving the emergency alert, the PA system, the digital signs, the LED marquees, but now we have that additional personal notification device directly targeting those two-way radios, effectively getting that communication across to all individuals throughout the facility. Now, looking at the importance of the visual notification, again, going back to those areas where we may have loud ambient noise, high ambient noise levels, restricted visual notification, we need to ask the question, what are we doing to capture the attention first and foremost of the individuals within that environment? Visual signaling through, say, stackable strobes allow us to communicate with individuals through a variety of different, say, colored strobes. If there are emergency protocols tied to those specific colors, we can initiate those at the same time as sending that message out to all personal devices, all visual devices, all audible devices throughout that facility as well. Going back to the outdoor notification, here you see our high-powered speaker arrays with our text-to-speech capability built into them, with clear voice technology, which, depending upon the environment that these are going to be mounted in, can have up to 3/4 of a mile range with clear voice, verbal alerting across large areas. An example of this may be a large parking lot, or if you have a large storage space outside of the indoor facility itself, and you have a number of staff actively present throughout the day in that outdoor space, our high-powered speaker arrays with a combination of that clear voice and potentially maybe, say, a siren tone laid on top of that is a great way to be able to capture the attention of those individuals. And obviously, depending upon the emergency itself, we can effectively communicate with accurate information at any point in time. It's not necessarily a fire or an evac situation. It's specific information as to what action should be carried out for those individuals in those hard to reach areas, in maybe those outdoor areas that you wouldn't be able to typically reach them in. Going back to the digital signage, as I stated earlier, digital signs are often already located within high visibility areas. Staff, personnel within that environment get used to looking in that general direction, but additionally, oftentimes there may be visitors or contractors within that facility. They may not be signed up to any personal notification through their cell phone. They may not have a designated desktop or VoIP IP phone, and it may be in a loud environment. We need to ask ourselves, how are we capturing their attention as well? Taking that layered approach, utilizing resources such as the alert beacon and such as, say, digital signage that is already in place, where we can now leverage those screens and get that information across to as many individuals within that area as possible. is our first point of concern. And finally, looking at our fire alarm interface integration as well, we're looking to leverage that current infrastructure, and we can do so in one of two ways with the fire alarm interface. We can utilize and leverage the speaker system that is being utilized within that fire alarm interface to get across that clear voice text to speech throughout that facility. But additionally, we can utilize that fire alarm interface as an activation method to trigger the Alert Asst solution. So a fire panel is pulled, it automatically triggers the server to then distribute that message across all endpoints, essentially automating the communication process and skipping the layer out of it where maybe, say, a designated individual is then assigned the task of distributing that message, automating that process, knowing a fire panel is being pulled, it's an emergency situation. We have predetermined preset messages that are then going to be distributed throughout that facility. So most importantly here, I want you to understand the fact that it's important to take that layered approach, visual, audible, indoor, outdoor, but also addressing, say, the personal and public notification factors as well that come into play in these high-risk environments, ensuring that all staff, all employees, all personnel throughout that facility have the means to receive communication and also activate the solution at any point in time. Should they be in that emergency environment, they can do so, and we are providing the means for them to do so as well. So now I would like to pass it over to Paige Holloway from Kissimmee Utility Authority, who can go through an example of how Alert Asst is being implemented within her facility. So over to you, Paige.
Thank you, Oliver. My name is Paige, and I'm from Kissimmee Utility Authority. We're an electric company. We were founded in 1901, and we serve about 80,000 electric customers, and we've had Alert Asst for about 3 years now. A couple of reasons we chose Alert Asst. We had a really close call with an active shooter. We had a gentleman come in our lobby with his father, and he got in line, and he just seemed a little irate as soon as he walked in, and he's getting in and out of line, and he got frustrated because a few of the customers would skip into the line or skip him when he'd get out. So he turned around to a few of our customers that were sitting in the lobby behind him, and he showed his face on the camera, and he said that, "Everybody see this face? You're going to see me on the 5 o'clock news. I'm about to commit a homicide." So he walked out to his car, and at that point, we had a few of our employees alert us, and we were watching him on the camera. He ended up walking out to his car, and he grabbed what appeared on the camera. It looked like a gun to us, but it was actually, I think it was a set of car keys. He left his car door open and ended up walking back inside. And at this point, we had multiple people trying to figure out what was going on. And eventually we were able to calm the customer down and get him out of the facility. But after we had assessed what happened, once he left, and revealed that it was just a set of keys, and fortunately for us, we noticed that a lot of our upper level staffs, our managers, our VPs, they all came into the area, that this person, potentially dangerous person, to the area, and we had everybody that had a lot of potential victims that we could have easily had all of them killed if this guy were to bring in a gun. So we figured out that we needed a mass communication system so that we could keep our employees out of the danger area and let them know that they need to get out of the building, and let them know to avoid the area when something like this happens. So with a minimal budget, we set out and we looked for different solutions, and we came across Alert Asst. So some of the things that we were able to find is we had a desktop takeover, we have messages on the Cisco phones, we have an app that employees can opt to get a message from the Alert Asst once the beacons are set off. to let them know that to avoid the area and they need to get out of the building. We took the Alert Asst button that we have and we co-located it with the rest of we have a lockdown system, so we put that next to the door on our way out, and we could hit that button and vacate the building. And so some of the lessons that we learned, we do an annual training, and in this annual training we found that when people get new phones or we have new employees, we found that they needed to update the app for the Alert Asst, just so that it was always working. They didn't have to sign in or anything. It would stay signed in. And to do this, we did mock trainings to train the employees on how to react to the situation. If they get this message on their phone and they get a text saying, evacuate the building, active shooter in this area, they know to avoid that area. We have a failover zone, and they know to go to that area. So we train them just like you would train somebody the way that you train somebody to react to a fire alarm. Everybody knows what to do, so nobody's in a panic. And once you train it so many times, it just becomes second nature to them. So we've actually done this training with the local SWAT team and the hostage negotiation team. They brought in a negotiator. They had actors with the guns that pretended as if they were keeping our employees hostage. We train the employees to react to the situation. As soon as they get the Alert Asst, they know to get out of the building, to avoid the area. So we just found that it was a very great enhancement to our overall security system, and we found that it was a great way to have a mass notification sent out to everybody and keep as many people as we can out of the danger zone. So that's about how Kissimmee uses.
All right, thanks, Paige. We really appreciate that, and thank you to Oliver as well. We're going to begin the Q&A session of our presentation. If you have a question, please feel free to submit it through the chat or question box. If we don't get to your question during this session, we will reach out to you and answer your question directly. Also, a recording of this webinar will also be shared with you after today's session. Let's begin with our first question. Is there a way to integrate the Alert Asst system with an access control system? And if so, which devices can you use?
So yes, we can tie into an access control system through our alert beacon. It is a dry contact closure. So we can effectively, in the event of, say, a lockdown scenario, maybe a lockdown button is pushed or the emergency lockdown button is distributed. At the same time, that contact closure is going to be initiated. The alert beacon is going to receive that message, and the appropriate message is then going to be distributed throughout.
All right, our next question. If my facility has multiple buildings with workers inside and outside, what devices would you suggest to notify all workers in any given area?
I would say we go back to that layered approach here that we discussed earlier. We want to make sure that we have, again, both visual and audible notification. From an outdoor perspective, the visual side of things can often be difficult unless we have some form of devices already present out there, maybe some areas with digital signs that we can tap into, but effectively an alert beacon is always going to be a great resource with that all-weather enclosure to be able to capture people's attention. And as I mentioned earlier, the high-powered speaker arrays are a great way to, over large distances, get that clear voice message across. And then coming back to the indoor environment, again, we want to have either a verbal representation of the emergency alert over a PA system or through one of our IP speakers, layering that with that visual notification on, say, desktop devices, personal cell phones via the mobile app, as Paige alluded to, and maybe, again, utilizing digital signs, LED marquees in those areas where it may be typically difficult to capture people's attention. Always bringing it back to that layered approach.
Next question. How does this system help with business continuity in the aftermath of an emergency?
Business continuity, I would say that, time is money, especially within a manufacturing environment, a distribution environment. these large industrial environments as a whole, we want to make sure that, yes, first and foremost, everybody is communicated with in the event of that emergency alert. First and foremost, we want everybody to be able to evacuate accordingly and receive the appropriate information to do so. But in the event that that emergency alert was, say, a false alarm, or the all clear is now present and they've dealt with the emergency situation, being able to communicate that all clear message in a timely manner and getting business processes back up and running is just as important as getting that first emergency message out as well. Bringing everybody back into play, getting accurate information across so everybody feels comfortable going back into that environment. Everybody knows what the situation was that arose. Business continuity is now dealt with in a timely manner, and people and operations can get back up and running in an effective time.
Next question here. How does the alert beacon interface with a voice fire alarm system?
With a voice fire alarm system, so as I mentioned before, we have two ways in which we can leverage the fire panel interface, one of which being that verbal alert over the speakers that are already being utilized within that fire panel itself. Line level audio input is enough for our text-to-speech component to verbally express that emergency alert over the speakers. But from the triggering standpoint and utilizing the fire panel to trigger the Alert Asst server to distribute the message, we are using an RS-232 feed to be able to pull that data and then distribute the appropriate message accordingly from there.
All right, this looks like it's our last question. Can a panic button be used to produce multiple messages?
For multiple messages, no. The panic button is, as you saw on the slides there, is customizable. It has different colors, but also different verbiage that can be placed on those duress buttons. And oftentimes those, or 100% of the time, that message or that verbiage that is on that duress button is going to be tied back to the appropriate preset message within that general area. So again, maybe going back to, say, a chemical spill, for example. If you have a certain designated area where all the chemicals are located, and that's a high risk area for a chemical spill, we could put a duress button with chemical spill typed out on that button. So in the event that a spill happens, the appropriate button is pressed and the appropriate preset message is being distributed to those designated individuals or throughout the entire facility. So it's predetermined preset messages per duress button.
All right, thanks, Oliver. We have now concluded the Q&A session of our presentation. Again, if we did not get to your question, we'll reach out to you directly with an answer. If you have any questions or need additional information, please feel free to email marketing@alertasst.com and we'll be happy to assist you. If you're looking for more information on Alert Asst and our solutions, you can visit our website at www.alertasst.com. And if you're interested in our upcoming webinar schedule, please visit alertasst.com/webinars. Thank you for joining today's webinar, and we look forward to meeting you again soon.